Welcome back. You're watching Trade of the Week. Today we bring you a technical analysis on the JSE Top 40 Naspers and Rivian Automotive. Our founder of Herenya Capital, Petri Redelinghuys, joins us now with that analysis. Thank you so much for your time. Petri, I know you are not a politician. But
you want to talk about Donald Trump, don't you?
Of course.
Okay.
Because are markets actually even taking notice, or are there certain parts of the market that's taking notice? Are people starting to kind of shift their trades, their portfolios, maybe in anticipation for a Trump win at this point? What's been your read?
So a Trump win is interesting. I think that if you look at the betting market, at least the bookies, it's got a now. I was talking to Simon about this a bit earlier, actually. And he made a good point where they're not really predicting the future as much as they're just responding to the flows of people placing bets, right? And then making the odds based on that.
Yeah.
But essentially that, you know, some of the betting agents or bookies put a Trump win at a 70% probability at this point.
Was it already?
It was already high.
Okay.
It's now higher.
All right.
And the chances of a sort of Republican sweep getting both the House and the Senate, you know, the
yeah, yes.
It's a bit of a complicated system how it works there, but essentially for the Republicans to completely clean sweep the whole government in the US is sitting at something like 46%, which is also up quite a bit from where it was before. So it's the most probable outcome, or whatever the case is at the moment. So
is gold like the natural place to go to right now?
I mean, to an extent, yeah. I also kind of want to say that if you look at there were two moments in Trump's career, I think, that he really, one was a star was born, and the other, I think, he became a superhero, right?
Yeah.
The first one was when he was debating Hillary Clinton, and she said, oh, you don't pay any taxes. And he says, no, I don't. I know the system's crooked, he says. And she says, oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I use the crooked system, he says. And that was a moment that really cemented him. If you want to change the tax laws, you change it, and I'll follow the rules. So that kind of made him a star, right? And I think that won him the election that he won the first time.
Yes.
This time around, after he essentially, and I'm talking centimeters, missed, you know, dodged death, if you will, throws his hand in the air. And
that
the crowd
fist,
goes,
that Amandla fist.
USA. And the crowd went absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Right? I think that turned him into a superstar.
Yeah.
At least in the eyes of his supporters.
Yeah, he became
right?
Mandela at that point.
You know? So I think that, from a probability perspective, the way that I see the thing unfolding now is Trump essentially dominates the election.
Yeah.
We've got a very strong reaction from the markets, like we saw the first time he got elected when he was president. The first time around, markets were really positive on the back of that. Unfortunately, the underlying economic issues don't go away.
Yes.
So, and a lot of the policies that he's, you know, put America first and all that is great in theory, but unfortunately leads to inflation. You know, combine that with the massive amount of money that was printed in during COVID.
Yeah.
You have a situation where I think we probably see markets respond very, very strongly leading into the election, and probably on the back of a Trump win. And then reality sets in 3 to 6 months after that, and finally the markets can come down a little bit and the bad times start. And this is something I think we've spoken about many times, and I feel like a bit of a broken record. I've been saying this for so long. But historically, when interest rates start to come down, recessions begin. Go look in history; it's happened every time.
So it's not all good news.
It's not going to be any different. Interest rates go up because the economy is doing well, and we need to slow it down. Because inflation is pushing up, because people are spending a lot of money, too much money is chasing too few goods, right? So interest rates go up, 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 up in order to slow down the increase of prices. When that reaches the point where it's like, well, price increases are no longer happening, the consumer is under too much, you know, the spender is under too much pressure. Let's make it easier for them by cutting interest rates. That's not a good sign.
Because it means something is breaking or cracking somewhere. And I guess, as Jerome Powell said last week when he was testifying in Congress, that too much monetary policy that is restrictive risks kind of jeopardizing the economy and employment.
Yes. So now this is sort of the way that I view the world at the moment, which, you know, may or may not be right. But I think we probably see recession in the US.
Yeah.
Let's call it the Western world, the West recession.
Yeah.
Where the US, for example, when the easing cycle comes in, the US starts to see a shrinking economy. They're going to a bit of a recessionary period. It's happened every time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be any different this time around. We in South Africa, thankfully, are in a position where we were largely ignored by the rest of the world because of our situation and our politics and our electricity and whatever. And suddenly, I don't know if you've noticed, but the lights have been on for like over 100 days now. It's been a good time, right? And you know what's going to happen on the back of that? Surprise! Economic growth, right? So I think that we are definitely one of the most attractive investment destinations, at least in the emerging markets at this world. Plus, we have the BRICS Association. So I think what we are starting to see is this move away from the West towards the East. We've spoken about this before.
Yes.
That the US will rally on the back of the Trump news and on the back of a Trump presidency and all of that. Eventually, reality settles in. They begin to recess. I think we mostly escape that as we recover from the onslaught we've had over the last 2 or 3 decades, right? And we start to recover from that. Government of national unity, these things are all fantastic. The rand strengthens, the markets run, our companies do well. I think we're in for a good time while the sort of developed world might be under a bit more pressure.
Well, nice segue into the technical analysis, because you're talking about our markets being attractive at this point and from here on out, as we might see some significant economic growth filtering through there.
Before we get into the stocks, is it okay? You mentioned gold. Can we just quickly have a look at the gold
please.
chart?
Oh, please.
So the gold chart that I have at the moment, and I'll just quickly do a little weekly chart here for you. Kind of looks like this. So this is the channel that it's been trading in for some time. So I started at the bottom end of the channel here in 2019, right? So we're very close to the top of this channel. The top of this channel, I mean, the longer it takes us to hit it, the higher the target gets. But let's call it 2,500 is essentially the top of the channel. We're now ranging here between 2,280 or 2,300, if you will, and 2,425-ish. That's a bit of a range. I'll draw that in for us quick if you want.
Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of a range situation happening here.
We've been talking about gold since 2020.
Well, I think we'll be talking about gold for the next 200 years, right? I mean, it's one of those things.
Fascinating.
So I think we've probably hit this 2,500 mark. And then probabilistically the move is back towards the bottom end of the channel. So this is the channel that we're trading in. Keep that in mind, because I think that this becomes this is the overall theme for gold at this stage, is that it's trending up, and it has been doing so since the beginning of time. But this is a sort of a realistic expectation for it. Once it gets to 2,500, maybe there's an opportunity for us to buy it, around 2,000 or 2,100 again at some point in the future.
All right, very, very interesting there. Well, let's get into the top 40. What are you seeing there on a technical level, considering also, I would imagine it's run pretty hard, or maybe because of its composition, maybe there's been some limit to the momentum we've seen.
So what I want to point out here is a couple of things. So we'll start with the weekly chart, right? So I got this big red cross here just to indicate, essentially, I like to mark the quarters, so you can ignore that one. Here we have, I'll put it as a ray, the all-time high record weekly close, being that top line. So I'll remove this one for now, right? That is the highest it's closed on a weekly basis ever. And if we look at a daily chart, which is going to give us the all-time high daily close, I mean, we can see it's essentially the same level, right?
Okay.
So this is the highest the top 40 has ever been, is that black marker line over there. And we are like right underneath.
Oh.
So for me, this is starting to look a bit like a breakout. If you zoom out a little bit more, we can see that we had tested the level, we're kind of touching it again. I don't think that there's much that's going to actually keep us from breaking higher here. We're looking at the US session that's actually not doing too badly at the moment. Let's just pull that up.
So there's you're expecting like a significant re-rating.
Yeah, so I mean, look at this, for example. This is the S&P 500, right? So after the Trump news, we are positive by 0.5%, 46 basis points on the day. So US markets are looking to open green and essentially, run for the day. If we compare that to the South African 40 index,
Yeah.
Right? We are now, this now sort of looks at a percentage term. So if we say we're going to look at the last 5 years, we can see that, okay, cool, SA40 or the top 40 index is up 42 and a bit percent here, while the S&P 500 is up 87%.
Oh.
So I think that there's a little bit of catching up to do here for us. And we've been under pressure, as mentioned, political issues, load shedding, whatever. Those are largely, at least seemingly, going to be dealt with by the new national government of national unity. So I think that this is a great opportunity for us to get in, and I think that even from a trading perspective, right? If you look at the top 40 index at this stage, if we break above the all-time high, let me just rebase this into regular. If we break above, the previous all-time high, there's literally no resistance. I think that we have a great setup here to be, if you're a trend-following trader, just be long. And we'll have a look at one of the more powerful stocks underneath that, which is Naspers, which we'll get to in a second.
Yes, yeah.
We know it's got a very heavy weighting on the index.
Yeah.
And yes, we look at the top 40 index, and you can buy a Satrix 40 or a Signia for top 40 index, or index tracking ETF is probably the easiest way. You can buy a top 40 CFD or a future or whatever. If you're more of an investor type, top 40 CFD or top 40 ETFs is probably the better way of doing it. But if you look at stuff like Naspers and some of the other heavyweights in the market, there are some bullish setups out there.
Well, let's zoom into Naspers.
All right. So looking at Naspers, what we have here is a couple of things. Firstly, this range has been in play for some time. It gave us a heart attack a couple of times as it looked like it was going to break out the bottom. It didn't. So a couple of fake signals here. But essentially, we've been ranging, call it between 3,000 and 3,500 Rand, right? We eventually broke out of that, traded up to just above 4,000, have now sort of bounced off of this, what was previously resistance is now support. We're in a very strong upward sort of configuration here if you look at the moving averages. And I think that this is a great entry to take a long position from. I mean, the Brave would have bought, on Thursday last week. Not everyone is brave. So we probably have an opportunity to get in now. We can put a little trend line in over there. Let me just make it look pretty. So we can do that. Okay. As a little flag formation, if you will. So a little break out here, I think we can essentially, one of two things. If the very technical trader would probably measure this move, the size of this range, right? And then project that out. So, okay, it's 500 Rand. So we probably then can project out $500 here, which is around there, approximately there, right? Okay. So that would be sort of a conservative target for this. Alternatively, you can measure this little post in here. Yeah. This little flag post formation in, clink, compress that a little bit, and then we'll copy that and kind of do that, right? Okay. So that's a potential little setup that we have on Naspers, and I think that this is quite a nice little entry point. So again, we're looking at weekly data. If you look at a daily chart, it looks slightly better. As we can see here, that we've got quite a strong break above, a very sort of adaptive trend line. We can see every time we break above this trend line, for the most part, we've at least got a couple of days of rally, particularly when we have a big breakout like that. We have quite a few strong days that follow, and we've had a similar type of setup here happening here. So I think we probably run up, 4,100 Rand at least.
All right.
And that, contextually, because of the weighting and the strength, the size of this business, it's going to push the all-share index as well. All it takes is for Naspers to sort of regain previous highs, and that pushes the top 40 index into record territory, right?
Okay, so they're linked that way. All right. Let's go into Rivian Automotive. We haven't spoken about this one.
So this is not even a South African business.
Yes.
Truthfully. So I made some notes. Allow me to read them. So relative performance rating, which is essentially, of 100, right? So essentially what it's doing is it is outperforming the S&P 500, which is listed in the US. It's outperforming the S&P 500 by a country mile, at least over the last couple of weeks, right? If you look at the longer term trend, I'm going to switch to a weekly chart for this. Over the longer term, it's from when it's listed, it's had a tough time.
Okay, yes, I see that.
But if you look at this sort of last little period here, since May, it's been, knocking the socks off the S&P 500. Two, you have this falling wedge formation where it seems to have broken out of, right? There isn't yet even enough data to put a 200-week moving average on here, just for the record. So it is slightly higher risk. There is also guidance from them that they are going to be, they reaffirmed a full year guidance that they're going to be producing 57,000 vehicles. So now this is a newer type of entrant into the EV market, if you will. And I think it's a slightly higher risky, play. But we like the setup. We like the sort of backdrop of the EVs. Even though we can debate whether or not EVs in the, if you take the entire supply chain into account, whether they're green or not, people like them, and people like the fact that there are alternatives available, and they're probably going to become more and more popular. So to see a competitor actually starting to do relatively well, they're raising capital, they've got a growing production, some steady demand for their product. I think that there's many years of returns to be had here, and this is a great opportunity to get in.
And even now, even after it has outperformed.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, contextually, it's only outperformed really since May to now. Yeah. Which is a very short period of time. Yeah. If you zoom out from when it listed to now, it's got decimated and the market's up massively, right? So, and I think that's one of the things, and I think we spoke, with new listings. It's very seldom that new listings actually, within the first 2 years, do well. The first couple of days, sure, everybody talks about it, right? Everyone's real excited. Oh, it's doubled. Yeah. And then, 2 years later, you can get it for like half price. Yeah. And I think that's what's happening here. I think that, when these companies list, particularly in the sort of EV space, or any exciting space, psilocybin, right? That's cannabis and whatever. Yeah. People are super excited. And then reality sets in like, okay, well, we're not billionaires tomorrow just because we listed a company. The capital was raised to grow the company, to build more production, to do whatever, right? And when that starts to filter in 2 or 3 years down the line, that's when you start getting some return on your investment. And it's often better to wait until the share price is halved from listing, and then you can buy some. And I think that's essentially the situation here with Rivian. It is coincidental that we have a great technical reason to buy now, rather than waiting any longer.
It's quite interesting seeing what's happening in the EV space, because even Tesla has now participated in the optimism. After it got decimated earlier on this year. Yeah,
it's been. I think what was interesting with Tesla is they were supposed to go. They were going to launch this robo-taxi service. So that if you have a Tesla, you can just kind of sign it up for robo-taxi, and then your car's out there driving itself, making money. And they delayed the launch of that to October. It was supposed to launch, I think, next month. And they've delayed it a bit. So Tesla's share price got hurt on the back of that. Yeah. But let's be honest, if that does happen, eventually, if they manage to pull that off and they do launch it and it's a service that actually works and it kind of, is the... I don't know, it's kind of like a rival to Uber, if you will. I think it can be massive. Hey? We'll see how that... Because that'll spur demand, because suddenly I can buy a Tesla and rent it out at the same time. It'll be very interesting.
Well, we will be keeping a close eye on those developments in that EV space. Thank you so much for your time and for your technical analysis today, Petri. That was Petri Redelinghuys, founder of Herenya Capital.